My mother had me when she was just 19. She was still in college, working part-time at a diner in downtown Detroit, trying to make something of herself. When she told my father about the pregnancy, he disappeared. Just packed up his things from their tiny apartment and left without a word. At 19, with no support and bills piling up, the responsibility was crushing her. My grandparents stepped in and took me home from the hospital. They raised me like their own daughter, in their small house on the east side of the city. Life was good those first 2 years. My grandmother would sing to me while making breakfast. She'd bounce me on her knee during her soap operas. My grandfather would come home from his factory job and toss me in the air until I squealed with laughter. Then tragedy struck. My grandmother had a heart attack while hanging laundry in the backyard. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. I was only 2 years old. My grandfather tried his best, but he was drowning in grief. He couldn't handle working full-time and raising a toddler alone. 6 months later, he married a woman from his church named Patricia. She seemed nice enough at first, always smiling at church functions and bringing casseroles to potlucks. But once they married, everything changed. Patricia convinced my grandfather that we needed to move. She said the old house had too many memories, that a fresh start would be good for everyone. So we packed up and moved 3 hours away to a small town in Ohio. My grandfather kept his factory job in Detroit, which meant he was gone Monday through Friday, coming home only on weekends. That left me alone with Patricia most of the time. My earliest clear memories start around age 4. Patricia worked as a cashier at the local grocery store, and she couldn't afford daycare. Instead, she'd drop me off with different relatives and neighbors throughout the week. There was her sister Linda, who lived in a trailer park. Her brother Tom, who had a house near the railroad tracks. The elderly couple down the street who needed extra money. I never knew where I'd end up each morning. Among these people was Patricia's cousin, a man everyone called Uncle Ray. He lived alone in a basement apartment that always smelled like cigarettes and old pizza. Patricia would drop me there twice a week while she worked double shifts. At first, Uncle Ray seemed okay. He'd let me watch cartoons and eat cookies for breakfast. But then things started to change. He began asking me to sit on his lap while we watched TV. His hands would wander places they shouldn't. He'd tell me we were playing special games that only big girls got to play. When I tried to pull away, he'd grip me tighter and whisper that if I told anyone, terrible things would happen. He said Patricia would send me away to an orphanage where mean kids would hurt me. He said my grandfather would stop loving me. He said no one would believe me anyway because little girls who tell lies go to hell. The abuse continued for months. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd beg Patricia not to leave me there. I'd cry and cling to her legs, but she'd pry me off and tell me to stop being dramatic. One day, when Uncle Ray hurt me worse than usual, I couldn't hold it in anymore. That night at dinner, I tried to tell Patricia what was happening. Uncle Ray touches me in bad places, I whispered, staring at my mashed potatoes. Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. Her face turned red. "Don't you ever say something like that again?" she hissed. "That's a filthy lie, and God punishes little girls who spread filthy lies. Uncle Ray is family. He helps us out when we need it. You should be grateful instead of making up stories." She sent me to bed without dessert and told me that if I ever said anything like that again, she'd wash my mouth out with soap. I learned that night that my pain was meant to be hidden, that speaking up only made things worse. When I was 7, Patricia started leaving me with different people. Uncle Ray had moved away suddenly, which felt like a miracle. But my relief was short-lived. Patricia's friend from work had a teenage son named Kevin. He was 16 and was supposed to watch me after school until Patricia got off work. Kevin was different from Uncle Ray. He didn't pretend to be nice. From the first day, he made it clear that I belonged to him during those hours. He'd lock his bedroom door and do things that made me feel like I was drowning. He'd show me pictures on his computer of other kids in situations like mine and tell me this was normal, that all kids did this, and I was weird for crying about it. "If you tell anyone," he'd say, holding a kitchen knife, "I'll hurt you so bad you'll wish you were dead. Then I'll hurt your family too, starting with that old man you call Grandpa." I believed him. I'd seen enough violence on TV to know that bad things happened to people who talked. So I stayed quiet and learned to disappear inside myself when Kevin locked that door. I'd imagine I was somewhere else, flying with birds, swimming with dolphins, anywhere but in that room. These experiences taught me that men were dangerous. Even at 8 years old, I could feel their eyes on me. The man at the corner store who'd offer me free candy if I'd give him a hug. The maintenance worker at school who'd find excuses to be alone with me. Patricia's new boyfriend who'd comment on how I was developing early, even though I was still just a child. By the time I was 10, I'd developed a survival strategy. I figured if men were going to hurt me anyway, maybe I could choose which one. There was a high school boy named Tyler who lived on our street. He was 17 and had a car. He'd offer me rides home from school, and I started accepting them. I thought if I let Tyler be my boyfriend, he'd protect me from the others. Tyler did protect me in a way. When other boys bothered me, he'd tell them to back off, that I was his girl. But that protection came at a price. What started as rides home turned into detours to empty parking lots. What started as holding hands turned into things no 10-year-old should experience. But in my mind, one predator was better than many. At least with Tyler, I knew what to expect. Life at home was getting worse. Patricia had lost her job at the grocery store and was working minimum wage at a gas station. My grandfather had been laid off from the factory and was struggling to find work at his age. There were days when the only meal I ate was the free lunch at school. I'd stuff my pockets with extra crackers and fruit, saving them for dinner. Patricia's frustration with our situation often turned into anger directed at me. She'd scream that I was another mouth to feed, that I was the reason she couldn't get ahead in life. She'd lock me out of the house for hours, telling me to go find somewhere else to eat if you're so hungry. Those were the nights I'd end up at Tyler's house, trading my body for a warm meal and a place to sleep. By 13, I understood that my body was currency. When I needed new shoes for school, I knew which older boy to approach. When I wanted to go on the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., I knew what I had to do to earn the money. It wasn't what I wanted, but I'd learned that wanting things was a luxury I couldn't afford. Survival was all that mattered. The other kids at school had no idea. I became an expert at hiding my reality. I'd laugh at their jokes, complain about homework, gossip about TV shows. But while they worried about their first kiss, I was negotiating with grown men. While they saved babysitting money for concert tickets, I was calculating how many times I'd have to let someone touch me to afford a winter coat. When I turned 15, everything changed again. My mother, who I'd barely seen over the years, suddenly showed up. She'd gotten her life together, she said. She had a steady job as a medical assistant in Columbus in a 2-bedroom apartment. She wanted me to come live with her. Patricia practically pushed me out the door. My grandfather hugged me goodbye with tears in his eyes, whispering apologies I didn't understand at the time. Within a week, I was enrolled in a new high school in Columbus, trying to start fresh. My mother laid down the rules immediately. "You're going to work," she said. "I can't afford to take care of you by myself. You're old enough to contribute." She got me a job at a restaurant where her friend was the manager. I was supposed to bus tables and wash dishes, but the owner, Mr. Peterson, had other ideas. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a wedding ring he twisted when he looked at me. He started keeping me after closing time, saying he needed help with inventory. But instead of counting supplies, he'd corner me in the storage room. "You need this job, don't you?" he'd say, pressing against me. "Your mom would be so disappointed if you got fired. Where else is a high school dropout like you going to find work?" I wasn't a dropout, but he didn't care about facts. He knew I was trapped. My mother needed my income to help with rent. If I lost this job, we might lose the apartment. So I endured it for 3 months, until one night when he tried to go further than ever before. I fought back, kicking and screaming until he let me go. I ran out of that restaurant and never went back. My mother was furious when I told her I'd quit. I couldn't bring myself to tell her why. Based on Patricia's reaction years ago, I knew she wouldn't believe me, or worse, she'd blame me for it. I found another job at a clothing store in the mall, but the pattern continued. The assistant manager would schedule me for closing shifts when it was just the two of us. The security guard would follow me to my car, offering to protect me for a price. By 17, I'd made a decision. If men were going to treat me like something to be bought and sold anyway, then I might as well set the terms. I started being more strategic about it. Instead of being a victim, I'd be in control. I'd choose who, when, and for how much. It wasn't empowering, like some people claim. It was survival, pure and simple. This mindset got me through the rest of high school. When I needed money for SAT prep books, I knew what to do. When my mother's car broke down and we needed $500 for repairs, I handled it. When I wanted to go to prom like a normal teenager, I earned the money for a dress and shoes. I told myself I was being smart, that I was using the system that had used me for so long. I graduated high school with decent grades, which felt like a miracle considering everything. I even got accepted to community college. That's where everything changed. That's where I met James. James was different from any man I'd ever known. He was in my English composition class, always sitting in the front row, always raising his hand to share thoughtful comments about whatever we were reading. He wore glasses that he'd push up his nose when he was thinking hard about something. He carried a beaten-up backpack covered in pins from various social justice organizations. We were paired together for a group project about social issues in modern America. I suggested we write about poverty, thinking I could share some sanitized version of my own experiences. As we worked together in the library, something strange happened. James actually listened to me, not in the way men usually did, waiting for their chance to make a move. He listened like my thoughts mattered, like I was a whole person with valuable things to say. "You're really insightful," he said one day, as we were packing up our books. "Have you thought about majoring in social work? You seem to understand these issues on a deep level." I almost laughed. If only he knew how personally I understood these issues. But his comment planted a seed. Maybe I could be more than what I'd been. Maybe my experiences could help others somehow. We started studying together regularly, then grabbing coffee after class, then having lunch between classes. James never made a move on me, which was confusing at first. I kept waiting for him to show his true intentions, to reveal what he really wanted from me. But weeks turned into months, and he remained respectful, kind, interested in my mind rather than my body. One day, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Why haven't you tried anything?" I asked him bluntly as we sat in his car after a study session. He looked genuinely confused. "Tried what? You know, why haven't you tried to kiss me or more?" His face turned red. "Because I respect you," he said simply. "Because I like you as a person, and I'm not going to do anything unless you explicitly tell me you want me to." I started crying right there in his car. Years of trauma came pouring out. I told him everything. Uncle Ray, Kevin, Tyler, Mr. Peterson, all of it. I expected him to be disgusted, to drop me off and never speak to me again. Instead, he held my hand and cried with me. "None of that was your fault," he said firmly. "You were a child. You were surviving. Anyone who made you feel like you had to trade your body for basic needs is a monster." That night changed everything. James became my anchor. The first person to show me that love didn't have to be transactional. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. My mother came, though Patricia and my grandfather didn't. We couldn't afford much, but we were happy. Our first child came a year later, a beautiful daughter we named Hope. 2 years after that, we had twin boys, Michael and David. James worked as a computer programmer while I stayed home with the kids, finally experiencing the childhood I'd never had through their eyes. But trauma doesn't just disappear because you find love. There were times when money was tight, when the kids needed things we couldn't afford. The old patterns would whisper in my ear. I'd remember how easy it was to get what I needed before. A few times, I slipped. There was the landlord who offered to forget about late rent if I'd visit him while James was at work. I said no at first, but when he threatened eviction and I looked at my baby's faces, I cracked. There was the manager at the grocery store who said he'd hire me with flexible hours if I'd meet him after closing once a week. I needed that job to buy school supplies for Hope. Each time the guilt ate me alive. I'd come home and see James playing with the kids, trusting me completely, and feel like the worst person in the world. I wanted to tell him, but I was terrified he'd leave and take the children. They deserved better than a mother who fell back into old patterns when things got tough. Even now, the offers come. The dad at Hope's dance class who slips me his number. The repairman who says he'll give us a discount if I'm nice to him. The neighbor who knows James works late and offers to keep me company. Sometimes I feel so weak, like I'm one crisis away from falling back into that life. But then I look at my children. Hope is 8 now, the same age I was when I started learning that my body was currency. When I see her laughing and playing, innocent and protected, I'm reminded of what childhood should be. I've promised myself she'll never know the hunger that drives you to desperate choices. She'll never feel like her body is the only valuable thing about her. The boys are 6, full of energy and questions about everything. They look at me like I'm a superhero, and some days that's the only thing that keeps me from giving in to temptation. How can I teach them to respect women if I don't respect myself? How can I raise them to be better than the men I knew growing up if I'm still trapped in those old cycles? James knows something is wrong. He's asked me several times if I'm okay, if there's anything I want to talk about. He's suggested couples therapy, individual therapy, whatever might help. Part of me wants to tell him everything, to finally be free of these secrets. But I'm terrified. What if he can't forgive me? What if he sees me as the damaged goods I've always believed myself to be? I've started writing in a journal, trying to process these feelings. Sometimes I volunteer at the local women's shelter, sharing my story with others who've been through similar experiences. It helps to know I'm not alone, that so many women have been forced to make impossible choices to survive. The healing isn't linear. Some days I feel strong, capable of resisting any temptation. Other days, when the bills pile up or the car needs repairs, that old voice whispers that there's an easy solution. I've learned to call a crisis hotline on those days, to talk to someone who understands without judging. I'm sharing this story because carrying it alone has become too heavy. I need people to understand that sometimes survival looks different than what society expects. That little girl who learned to trade her body for food and shelter is still inside me, still scared, still trying to protect herself the only way she knows how. But I'm fighting to be better. Every day I choose to get up and be the mother my children deserve, even when it's hard. Every day I choose to honor the love James has shown me, even when I feel unworthy of it. Every day I choose to believe that my past doesn't have to define my future, even when the past keeps knocking at my door. I don't know if the temptation will ever fully go away. I don't know if I'll ever completely heal from what happened to me, but I do know that I'm tired of letting those experiences control me. I'm tired of feeling like that scared little girl who had no choices. Because now I do have choices and I'm determined to make the right ones. If you're watching this and you've been through something similar, know that you're not alone. Know that what happened to you wasn't your fault. Know that survival isn't something to be ashamed of.